cultures of indigenous peoples in Bolivia developed in the high altitude settings of Altiplano with low oxygen levels, poor soils, and extreme weather patterns. The better suited lowlands were sparsely inhabited by hunter-gatherer societies, while much of the pre-Columbian population was concentrated in Altiplano valleys of Cochabamba and Chuquisaca. Aymara people arrived in the region some 2,000 years ago, eventually settling in western Bolivia, southern Peru, and northern Chile. Present-day Aymaras associate themselves with the advanced culture of Tiwanaku, which after 600 became an important regional power. According to early estimates, at its maximum extent, the city covered approximately 6.5 square miles and had between 15,000 and 30,000 inhabitants. Tiwanaku's elites gained their status through the surplus food they controlled, collected from outlying regions, and then redistributed to the general populace. Further, this elite's control of llama herds became a powerful control mechanism, as llamas were essential for carrying goods between the civic center and the periphery. Through this control and manipulation of surplus resources, the elite's power continued to grow until about 950 AD. After 950, a dramatic shift in climate occurred and there was a significant drop in precipitation for the Titicaca Basin. Tiwanaku disappeared around 1150 AD because food production collapses and could no longer sustain a large population. The land was not inhabited for many years after that. Between 1438 and 1527, the Inca Empire embarked on a mass expansion, acquiring much of what is now western Bolivia under their ninth emperor, whose reign lasted from 1438 to 1471. He was succeeded by his son, whose reign also increased the Incan territory and lasted from 1471 to 1493. During the 15th century, the Incas conquered the region of Lake Titicaca, and western Bolivia became a part of the Incan territory. Francisco Pizarro, Diego de Almagro, and Hernando de Luque led the Spanish discovery and conquest of the Inca Empire. They first sailed south in 1524 along the Pacific coast from Panama to confirm the existence of a legendary land of gold called Biru. Because the rapidly expanding Inca Empire was internally weak, conquest was remarkably easy. The Incan emperor did not attempt to defeat the Spanish when they arrived on the coast in 1532 because the Incan ruler was convinced that those who commanded the mountains also controlled the coast. His refusal to accept the permanent Spanish presence and to convert to Christianity led to the bloody Battle of Cajamarca on November 16, 1532. The Spanish, in a masterful strike, killed the Incan 12-man honor guard. 1 year later, the Incan capital of Cusco fell to the Spanish and was refounded as a new Spanish settlement. Later that year, colonial authorities established the city of La Paz, which soon became an important commercial center. The conquest and colonial rule were traumatic experiences for the indigenous peoples in Bolivia. Easily susceptible to European diseases, the native population decreased rapidly. The Spanish established Santa Cruz de la Sierra in 1561. During most of the Spanish colonial period, this territory was under the authority of the Viceroyalty of Peru. Bolivian silver mines produced much of the Spanish Empire's wealth, and Potosi was for a couple of centuries the largest city in the Western Hemisphere, not including Europe. In 1784, Spain established 4 intendancy districts in Upper Peru, covering the present-day departments of La Paz, Cochabamba, Potosi, and Chuquisaca. Upper Peru was joined to the new viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, with capital in Buenos Aires, upon its creation in 1776. The official Inca religion disappeared rapidly, and Native Americans continued their local worship under the protection of local Native American rulers. As Christianity's influence grew, a new folk Catholicism developed, incorporating symbols of the indigenous religion, whereas early Native American rebellions were anti-Christian. The revolts at the end of the 16th century were based in messianic Christian symbolism that was Roman Catholic and anti-Spanish. In the late 18th century, a growing discontent with Spanish rule developed among the colonies. Although Upper Peru was fundamentally loyal to Spain, the ideas of the Enlightenment and independence from Spain continued to be discussed by scattered groups of radicals. As Spanish royal authority weakened during the Napoleonic Wars, sentiment against colonial rule grew. Independence was proclaimed in 1809, but 16 years of struggle followed before the establishment of a republic named for Simón Bolívar. The invasion of the Iberian Peninsula by Napoleon's forces proved critical to the independence struggle in South America. The overthrow of the Bourbon dynasty and the placement of Joseph Bonaparte on the Spanish throne tested the loyalty of the local elites in Upper Peru, who were suddenly confronted with several conflicting authorities. Most remained loyal to the Spanish Bourbons. Taking a wait-and-see attitude, they supported the Supreme Central Junta in Spain, a government which claimed to rule in the name of the abdicated Ferdinand VII. A small number of radical Creoles wanted independence for Upper Peru. On July 16, 1809, Pedro Domingo Murillo led another revolt by Creoles and mestizos in La Paz and proclaimed an independent junta of Upper Peru, which would govern in the name of Ferdinand VII. By November 1809, Cochabamba, Oroyu, and Potosi had joined the La Paz junta. Both revolts were put down by forces sent to La Paz by the viceroys of Peru and the Rio de la Plata. Eventually, the Constitutional Congress declared Bolivia an independent republic on August 6 and named the new republic in honor of Bolivar, because it wanted to gain his support for Bolivian independence from Peru. During the presidency of Marshal Andres de Santa Cruz, Bolivia enjoyed the most successful period of their history with great social and economic advancement. Santa Cruz openly declared the Inca Empire as the predecessor of his state. This move was perceived as a threat to regional power balance and a menace to countries on former Inca territory. The War of the Confederation broke out, and different wars against almost all of its neighbors were fought during this period, with many sound victories against its enemies. Arguably, the turning point took place on the fields of Paucarpata, where the Confederation Peru-Bolivia, led by Santa Cruz, formed the Chilean and Peruvian rebel armies to sign the peace treaty known as the Paucarpata Treaty, which included their unconditional surrender. Later, this treaty was discarded by the Chilean parliament. The rebel Peruvians and the Chilean army set off to a new war against Santa Cruz, defeating the Confederation at the Battle of Yungay. This was the turning point in Bolivian history. After this moment, coups and short-lived constitutions dominated Bolivian politics for nearly 40 years. Bolivia's military weakness was demonstrated during the War of the Pacific, when it lost its Pacific seacoast and the adjoining nitrate-rich fields to Chile. An increase in the world price of silver brought Bolivia a measure of relative prosperity and political stability in the late 1800s. Bolivia's defeat by Paraguay in the Chaco War marked a turning point. Great loss of life and territory discredited the traditional ruling classes, while service in the army produced stirrings of political awareness among the indigenous people. Standing alongside the Mexican Revolution, the Bolivian National Revolution is one of the most significant socio-political events to occur in Latin America during the 1900s. The revolutionary nationalist movement emerged from the ashes of the Chaco War in 1941 as a middle-class political coalition eschewing Marxism for nationalism. The party initiated a brief but bloody civil war in October 1949, but was defeated. The MNR emerged victorious in the 1951 elections, but the results were called fraudulent by the opposition, and its right to the presidency was denied. For the next 20 to 30 painful years of Bolivian history, a military junta ruled Bolivia and brought despair upon the potential of the state. After a military rebellion forced out Garcia Meza in 1981, three other military governments within 14 months struggled with Bolivia's growing problems. Unrest forced the military to convoke the Congress elected in 1980 and allowed it to choose a new chief executive. The country was pushed to democracy, then following its neighbors. The transition did not start well, with major social unrest, chronic strikes, unchecked drug trafficking, and hyperinflation of 24,000%. Those terrible things have been greatly reduced but not eradicated, and nowadays, as of July 2024, there is a deep internal division within the ruling party between the supporters of the president and the former president. That is it for the history of Bolivia. Now time for some quick statistics. Bolivia's land area is barely under 1.1 million square kilometers, the 27th largest country in the whole world. The population of Bolivia is only 12.5 million people, being equal to 0.15% of the world population. The GDP is 45.85 billion US dollars, and the capita is 3,701 US dollars. So, that is it for the history of Bolivia.